Right, folks, Champions Cup 2022-2023 is done and dusted. I have with me Mark from On the Mark Rugby. From the Mark Rugby.
Hey
Get it right,
guys,
Mark. Get it right. How's it going, Mark?
good, good. Excited to talk about some more rugby and especially the knockout stages. But um, yeah, it should be good.
This is going to get confusing because we're both named Mark, but I'm sure we will kind of plow on. Now, Mark's got a YouTube channel as well called From the Mark Rugby. I would advise you guys to all check him out. I'll chuck a link down in the description. We had a chat the other day about the Champions Cup. Obviously, you being a proud Irishman and Leinster supporter, you're kind of more au fait
Yeah,
with a lot of the Champions Cup stuff than I am. And the other day we talked about like the pool stages, the round of 16. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on the kind of latter stages of the knockout period, the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, and the final. But I mean, you're a Leinster fan. It's been a couple of weeks now. How are you feeling about the kind of whole thing with Leinster? Maybe not living up to maybe some of the expectations which have been kind of building. Like the drive for that fifth star just keeps going on.
yeah. Well, I think like like a lot of Leinster fans kind of felt like that this year was supposed to be the redemption year after what happened last year,
Right.
and the fact that it didn't happen. A lot of Leinster fans are kind of questioning the way Leinster approached their season, especially in knockout rugby, where in the URC they're playing, you know, like a second or even like a third string team where
Mm.
they're trying to keep a 23 for the Champions Cup,
Right.
and it hasn't been working. Like some players are looking like they're not match fit. The likes of Furlong, you know, didn't look match fit in the final and in the semi-final either. And wondering now what's going to happen really going forward, because resting players during the season and trying players out is great, but what benefit did that give the team for this year? And when you look at the teams from the final last year, like Leinster had 20 of the same 23
Yeah, that's right.
from the final last year. And it felt to me like this year that basically, Johnny Sexton was one of those that wasn't included. And
That's right.
obviously he was fit, he's in.
Mm.
So what I'm wondering from that is, how did this season develop the team? Because I felt like when we got to the sharp end of the season, that pretty much the squad for the final, if we got to the final, was already picked,
Mm.
and there were very few places up for grabs, and lack of competition then makes it very difficult to drive the team on.
Yeah,
And
true.
I'm hoping that's going to change for next year.
Yeah, maybe lacking a little bit of that kind of battle hardened, spirit amongst the camp. It's one
Yeah,
that the New Zealand teams have certainly kind of experimented with in the past, and kind of rotating guys for Super Rugby. It tends to be not a popular concept down here, but I guess there is a balance, between thrashing the players that they don't have any energy by the end of the season, and then kind of keeping them, like you said, match fit. But I won't kind of relive that kind of sadness, that sad moment for you too much. I mean, it's still you've still got a pretty successful team. I think you guys will be all right. But if we go back to the quarterfinals, your guys played
yeah,
the team which I guess, just to be as confusing like the two marks here now, Leinster and Leicester, which a couple of years
yeah,
ago
yeah.
I would have been absolutely confused as to which team was which. But the two teams with the names that sound about as similar as they're going to get, 50, maybe not as bad as Sale Sharks and the South African Sharks, but 55-24, that was a bit of a hiding.
It was, and I think Leinster got off to the perfect start as well. Because like a try from Ringrose in the first minute, and they kind of get out to a lead, and they were looking like they were like cruising through the game, and then I think Anthony Watson scored just
Mm,
before half time, gave Leicester a bit of hope, but then second half Leinster just pulled away, and it felt kind of very easy as a Leinster fan. Like there was no real worry
right.
in that game because they always had that lead, and it looked like they were adding to it as the game went on. There were never really huge periods of pressure from Leinster. or
Wasn't
for
exactly a
from
kind of
Leicester.
edge of your seat one, but that was true
No,
with
no,
all of the quarterfinals. Because if I just rattle off the other
yeah,
results, Toulouse beat the Sharks 54-20. Exeter beat the Stormers 42-17, which is the one that I thought might be the closest at the time.
yeah,
And then La Rochelle against Saracens was 24-10, which is the closest one on paper. But I
yeah,
seem to remember La Rochelle kind of, if it was an arm wrestle, largely having kind of Saracens
yeah,
where they
yeah.
wanted
I
them for the
think,
most part.
yeah, I think that La Rochelle game as well. Like Bottia in that game, probably the best individual performance in a single game throughout the entire competition.
Mm.
The guy was just on it, like winning breakdowns, making breaks, offloads, and he only played 60 minutes, but
Wow.
his performance just kept him, you know, ahead of Saracens. And even though it was close on the scoreboard, it Saracens find it very hard to apply real pressure. La Rochelle looked very comfortable
Mm.
in defence against them the entire game.
Mm. 26 points, I think, is the average difference between the winning sides and the losing sides in those
Yeah,
quarterfinals.
yeah.
So, yeah, is that. Did that make for kind of a kind of disappointing round, or was it just leading up to the build up of like, right now we're going to see the big guns, like the big four, truly go at it in the semis?
I think some of the games were disappointing. Like Stormers didn't turn up against Exeter at all,
Mm.
and like they're 28-0 down just after half time, and by the time they started scoring, it didn't matter. So that game was, as a neutral watching it, there was no excitement in it. But then the Sharks were in the game with 15 minutes to go
Right.
against Toulouse. But then Toulouse score three tries and it looks like a blowout there.
Yeah.
But I think overall, like, in the quarterfinal, you want to see one of the away teams winning. Like
Right.
that's what the competition is kind of based on, is that it's possible for someone to go away against a big name in Europe and pull off an amazing victory. And none of the games really felt like that was going to happen. There was no, like, going into the last 5 or 10 minutes of every game, you knew who was going to win.
Yeah.
And that's kind of disappointing in a quarterfinal.
Yeah, it's one thing that Super Rugby had the previous year, and that all the home sides with this new rejig Super
Yeah,
Rugby
yeah,
competition, we're pretty comfortable winners. It's something that we are
yeah,
kind of staring down the barrel of this coming weekend with the Super Rugby quarterfinals getting underway. There's one game in there which kind of like, because it's first against eighth, second against seventh kind of
yeah,
thing. The fourth and fifth one actually looks pretty tasty, but
yeah, yeah,
for the most part, on paper, those games are not looking that flash. But if we go back to the Champions Cup,
yeah,
what that did do with the semi-finals, I mean, on paper, Leinster against Toulouse, that's a couple of the biggest clubs
yeah,
in
yeah.
world rugby, European rugby that you're going to get. And La Rochelle against Exeter, I thought that looked like a little bit of a mismatch because Exeter aren't really the club that they were, back when they won the Champions Cup was a couple of years ago
No,
now.
but at the same time, Exeter, like, they put out the French champions in the round of 16,
That's right.
and then the URC champions in the quarterfinals. So
Mm. So you
they
thought you
had,
never know,
and they,
right?
yeah, and the fact that they'd shown that they could make games tight, like, against Montpellier, went all the way to the end of extra time as well. Felt like there was a possibility there
Yeah,
for them
there seemed to be
for
something
that.
about this Exeter side in the Champions Cup. But then again, 41-22, Leinster over
Yeah,
Toulouse, and 47-28 in the La
yeah,
Rochelle Exeter game. So again, two kind of big blowouts, which is not ideal for a semi-final.
no, no. And then, like, I think the Toulouse one, like, they had that injury
They
early
had
on,
the
like
early
where
injury
Grau had
because
to come on.
they had two backs on the bench. They went with the 6-2 split.
Yeah,
So yeah, they were
yeah,
rejigged the entire game, which certainly didn't help
yeah,
their
and
cause.
it's like shifting Dupont to 10 and then to back to 12. Like,
Mm,
you've got probably the greatest player of this generation of
right.
players, certainly in the conversation for it. Uh, you know, Playing at nine,
Yeah.
why move him? Like, make anyone else, like, for me, I'd make a back rower play on the wing to
Yeah.
keep him at nine.
Yeah.
That's like, why do you want him to have less touches of the ball? A
Yeah.
guy that can break a game like this, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah, it did seem like kind of an odd tactical call, but I guess that's the gamble these teams go with when they do play. The
Yeah,
6-2
yeah,
split. You sometimes need that incredible player like a Botia who can be a forward or a back or a front stain who can
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
much cover the entire back line. You
yeah,
need someone special who's going to be able to, to slot in and everything's going to kind of keep on hunky dory. But yeah, I think it's 19 points average scoreline difference for the semi-finals. So
yeah,
yeah, I kind of felt it was just a bit underwhelming at the time. Now, this is all
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
washed away by the fact that the final was phenomenal. But
yeah.
the
But
semi-finals
but
at the
up to
time,
that point,
I was kind of let
yeah,
down.
yeah, because up to that point, every home team had won in the
Yeah,
knockout stages, round of 16, quarterfinals, semi-finals,
yeah,
and there's no excitement in that. Like you want to see, you want teams to believe that if you get a away draw, you can still win and go through. That's what the magic of this competition is
exactly.
about. Like, in the past, we've seen like the likes of Munster or maybe Saracens or something going away to France and pulling off an epic win and then going on, to maybe make a final or to lift the trophy. But for this one, it's not just the fact that the home teams won. It's again the margins that every game felt comfortable
Mm,
because Toulouse got an early try against Leinster and Exeter opened the scoring as well
that's right.
against La Rochelle, but within a few minutes both of the home teams were you know already beyond them and pulling away, and it's disappointing for semi-finals really to end up like that because again, you want to feel like every team has a chance at this stage, especially when you think that like it's the top four seeds as well
Yeah,
that have come there. You know, it's not like it's Leinster against like an underdog that somehow scraped
yeah,
through, or La Rochelle against the bottom seed or wherever. Like Toulouse and Exeter were the next best seeds behind Leinster and La Rochelle, and neither of them really did themselves justice in their semi-finals.
yeah. Do you think if we replay those games again in the if something similar were to happen in the coming Champions Cup, like if Toulouse play Leinster again, do you think it's closer than 41-22 if they don't have that injury in the back line? Do you think it's closer?
Well, I thought it was going to be closer this year because
Mm.
they had it last year. It was the same semi-final and pretty
Yeah,
much the same margin.
yeah,
So it's hard to say that it would be different because I always look at rugby games that unless it's like the last kick of the game, to win the game,
mm.
whether that goes over or not. That's the only point in the game I feel like that. If you change that, then it completely affects the
Right.
result. Whereas with other things, if they don't have the injury and Dupont is still on there, then Leinster have to win the game in a different way. But it
Sure.
doesn't mean that the score is going to be any different
Right.
in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember being definitely not that thrilled. However,
Yeah,
the final I was still pretty pumped. I was looking. There wasn't much media about it here because the competition doesn't get a heck of a lot of coverage down here in NZ. But from what I was reading, it was kind of a storyline. It's in Dublin. Last year was in France.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's the time to kind of set things right with the location maybe being the thing that made the difference in the
yeah,
game last year. This is the kind of this is the time. This is Leinster's time. And looking at the bookies odds, looking at the kind of online predictions, everything was pointing to Leinster relatively comfortably,
yeah, yeah,
like more than a score anyway. So it's not going to be within 7 points come the final whistle. And then they started insanely well,
yeah.
like
Crazy,
the
like
best.
70-0 up after 11 minutes.
Unbelievable. You must have been thinking the trophy, start engraving it now at the time.
Well, for me, like you know, being a Leicester fan for so long,
Mm,
thinking back to the Northampton final when we finally won our first Heineken Cup,
mm.
we did what La Rochelle did. We were the ones who were way behind at half time
Is that
and
right?
had to come out in the second half. Yeah, that was the one where like Contapomi was at the time
Oh,
Leinster starting 10, and
okay.
he gets injured, so Sexton has to play in the
Is
final.
that
And
right?
then Sexton gives his speech at halftime talking about like Liverpool in the Champions League
Oh,
coming
with
back
to the
from 3
Turkey
nil down
one.
to win.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And so for me, that was always in the back of my mind that the game is not done because La Rochelle is such a good team and they just need a purple patch. And the
Mm,
fact that as well, they like they won like was it Carbarlo got the early yellow card,
that's
but
right.
they won that yellow card period
They
seven
did. Yeah.
five,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and normally Leinster scored right after the yellow card, but didn't do anything else. It was
Right.
all La Rochelle
Right.
during the yellow card period, and that kind of the fact that they already started coming back in the first half, kind of there was no there wasn't very long to think about such a big lead because they started chipping away at
Started
it
chipping away at it pretty
very
much straight
early.
away.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I mean, now that it has been a bit of time, and obviously in the second half, La Rochelle start turning the screws. Leinster struggle for possession.
yeah.
They get themselves in front. Now that it's been a bit of a period of time, you can kind of take some of the emotion out of it. Like, can you look back at that final and go like that was a fantastic game of rugby?
Oh, straight after it was a fantastic game.
You could still feel that you weren't
For
just like burned,
yeah.
like because I mean Johnny Sexton's apparently been ranting and raving at
Oh,
the ref by all
I saw that.
accounts. Yeah.
That I don't agree with doing stuff like that, but
Okay.
yeah, because like first and foremost, like I'm a rugby fan and then a Leicester fan. That's
Right.
the way I look at it, and obviously disappointed with the result because I want my team to win, but
Sure.
it was still a very enjoyable game to watch, and I felt like that. There was a couple of things that made it almost inevitable the result, and in that second half because Leinster scored their last points in the 46th minute
Yeah.
when Byrne converted a penalty. And then the fact that like La Rochelle again were so comfortable in defence that I think that even if people were talking about if Byrne had got some of his conversions that he missed in the first half, etc. It felt like that if La Rochelle needed 3 points to win at the end rather than Leinster, La Rochelle would have got them because Leinster were conceding penalties in defence and La Rochelle weren't.
True.
So they would have had a kick to the post, whereas Leinster didn't. But yeah, overall, you're looking at some of the fantastic players on both teams really shining, and that's what you want to see as a rugby fan. It gave us what was missing from the entirety of the rest of the knockout
Yeah.
stages in
Yeah.
terms of entertainment.
Yeah, and I do feel like in a couple of years from now, I'm probably not going to remember much about the knockout stages other than the
No,
final. I'm probably not going to remember
yeah,
the semi-finals and the quarterfinals were blah. I'm probably just going to
no,
remember that final. So everything else will probably just be kind of washed away in the history. But
yeah,
yeah,
and I think because of that, in years to come, people will look back at it as being a good competition this year, whereas they won't go back and watch the highlights of any other games other than the final, probably.
yeah, because nothing else was really
Yeah,
that kind of start. Like there was nothing kind of edge of your seat about anything else.
yeah.
Do you see it being more competitive next season? There's going to be a few
I
guys
think,
who've maybe hung up the boots after the World Cup, maybe a few coaching changes.
yeah, I think like Saracens probably need to reset their squad because they kind of showed in that quarterfinal that they, they just weren't great players and they were a brilliant team, but they're at that stage now where they need fresh faces in, and that may propel them or they might drop for a while. But looking at you got the Stormers are going to have another year where they're developing again. They kind of got used to the competition this year, and I think for the lessons that they learned, it's in terms of that the quarter final where they just start completely cold and they're completely flat. They won't want that to happen anymore. So they're going to be competitive. Then we've got Munster have just won the
Yeah,
URC,
yeah.
so they're going to be on a high from that, and you can see that
Confidence.
they've got the confidence and their attacking game has come on so much
Leaps and
this
bounds.
year. You still got a ways to go because you saw against even the start of the URC final, they running lines are wrong, and They weren't going to go forward, but once they got into stride, so next year they've got another year development. Leinster will be competitive just because of the players that are there.
Sure, depth
But
from the squad.
I think in terms of winning, Leinster need to do something different, I think, next year. La Rochelle definitely going to be there because they're going to have the guts of that team still around. There aren't going to be that many players that are retiring. And also, we talked about Leinster from last year's final. Like La Rochelle, I think, had 8 different players
That's right.
from last year's final in their squad. So,
yeah.
yeah, so they're able to bring players in and keep it fresh, which is good. Toulouse, are going to want to respond as well. So I think there's plenty of teams that are going to be competitive in it, but it's when you get to the sharp end, it really is, it's all about the matchups.
Yeah.
Because if Toulouse play La Rochelle in the semi-final, it's probably Toulouse are going to win because they just seem to have the wood over La Rochelle. Yeah. So it's all about matchups in the knockout stages. But that's what the rest of the competition is supposed to set up. Yeah. And I think we talked about last time with the format of the competition not being great overall, especially the pool stages and stuff. And I think it leads to situations like this where, the home team have so much more of an advantage than they used to have.
Yeah. Well, I am hopeful next season's competition is a little bit more tasty prior to the final. I mean, I think we've been treated pretty well with some, this year's final was close. The previous one was close. Obviously, Leinster fans are still waiting for that fifth star, which is proving mighty elusive. But yeah, I'm pleased overall with that. And the coverage over here in New Zealand, like I said, doesn't really get much running in the media, but all the games are on our broadcaster here, so at least it's on, which is, it's it just makes my life a bit better knowing that the games are on. Don't have to look for any kind of nefarious means to.
It can be tough when you need to that. Yeah. But I think overall, final was good. Competition, not so much. We talked about pool stages and round of 16, very forgettable. Then the quarterfinals, semi-finals, very one-sided.
Yeah.
And something we didn't touch on, and I just want to touch on this because I heard a lot of Leinster fans talking about it, is the refereeing. I thought in the final, Jacob Piper did a great job. And I think if you're a rugby fan and you weren't told who the referee was somebody to describe what happened in the final, you would probably say it was Jacob Piper refereeing.
Yeah.
That there was nothing, he didn't pull out any big surprises compared to other times. What I don't like when if a team loses, you automatically blame the referee, and then when the referees do a decent job, they never really get the praise that the players do either.
Yeah,
but I think he did.
That's not unique to any particular team. I've actually made it a point sometimes of going onto Facebook of all places, post match of virtually any competition around the world, and if you look at the post match comments of the team who has lost, there's going to be a fair bit of, oh geez, but how about that ref? We were robbed. How about this tackle? How about this offside? How about this missed call? It's just one of those things, and I tend to try and not let it fluster me too much. Weirdly, it's only when the Crusaders and the Blues play. Blues are my team, and the Crusaders are a kind of traditional rival. Like those are the ones where I'm more likely to get a little bit more one-eyed. But hopefully, for the most part, I figure the ref's just gonna try and call it as best down the middle as they can. They're gonna make mistakes both ways. I'm not really fussed on. Going through everything with a fine-tooth comb, because then, like you said, even if you were to go back and change some moment that had happened on like the 50th minute, things are going to play out differently. So it's not necessarily going to, have gone in any particular way in your team's favor. If they overturned a call, they might have still conceded points 2 seconds later. You never know. It's all hypothetical at that point. So, but overall, I thought the competition's final was fantastic, but everything else still could use a little bit of a. I'm not saying there wasn't anything good about it, but they could still use a little bit of, just a bit of oomph about it in the prior to that kind of final knockout stages. But cheers for that, Mark. We did talk as we talked about the start a couple of days ago. Mark and I talked on his channel about the pool stages and about the round of 16. So I'll chuck a link down to that video as well if you want to check out that one. We talked about all kinds of other stuff that day as well. We talked about like the smart ball, and we talked about
Yeah.
we kind of got a bit off track
World
that time.
Rugby and
Yeah,
yeah.
World Rugby and what they're doing. But yeah, it was a good chat. But yeah, good to catch up with you, and yeah, we will see how things go. I hope you're going to tune into the Rugby Championship, which is getting started very shortly. And
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
do you have a team in Super Rugby?
In Super Rugby, I used to follow a lot. I used to be a Taz fan.
A Tars
Not
fan.
so much,
They've
and
got
not
my
so much
Blues this
anymore.
weekend, so
Yeah,
be careful with that.
yeah, because I used to be kind of big into Super Rugby.
Right.
Um, kind of around the time when the last Lions tour went
Oh yeah.
down to Australia.
No,
So
it's a wee while ago.
yeah,
Tars were pretty good
so
back then, though.
I used to follow the Taz.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see how they go this weekend against my Blues. But anyway, cheers for chatting, Mark, and yeah, hope to catch up again soon.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.